Hello and good afternoon. My name is Barbara Proschel, and I'd like to welcome you to the Friends of the Institute's lecture series. Today, we are going to have a moderated discussion about art that focuses on the common man and everyday life, and about art collecting by a remarkable couple, Gabriel and Yvonne Weisberg. But first, a word from our sponsor. This lecture is presented by the Friends of the Institute and made possible by a generous grant by the Mark and Mary Goff Fiterman Fund. And up on the screen, you'll notice some upcoming Friends events. We have the tour of Mia's framing facilities on the 15th. On the 17th, we have our book club. And this month's book is The Killers of the Flower Moon. Our book club sessions come with coffee and conversation, and afterwards also a tour of Mia's art pieces that are related to the book. On the 14th, we'll have our December lecture with Wing Young Huey, a local award-winning photographer, followed by the Friends Winter Luncheon. Also, I'd like to remind everybody that after the lecture, we will have some tours of realism art at MIA. So if you'd like to participate, the tours leave from the Fountain Court after the talk. And now I'd like to introduce our moderator for today, Tom Raisseur. And Tom is the MIA John E. Andrus III Curator of Prints and Drawings. He's also the curator of Reflections on Reality, which is the exhibition that contains the Weisbergs collection. And he is the co-author of the ebook that accompanies the show, along with Gabe Weisberg and Winifred Smith. So without further ado, please help me welcome Tom Raisseur and our special guests, Yvonne and Gabriel Weisberg.
Thank you very much, Barbara, and many thanks to the Friends for offering this opportunity. I could introduce Gabe and Yvonne in full, but then we would simply have no time for the discussion. This is Gabe's short resume, okay? And it's a single space and it's quite long. So I'm going to give you a couple of highlights. One, Gabe is the professor emeritus of art history at the University of Minnesota. And he taught there for many years, and he earned his PhD at Johns Hopkins University in Baltimore in 1967. He then went on to become the professor of the curator of art history and education at the Cleveland Museum of Art, and was an adjunct professor at Case Western University in Cleveland. And that the reason I highlight that one is that is the moment when Gabe was really becoming very prominent and productive as a scholar, and doing his first major exhibitions. And when I mentioned Gabe doing exhibitions, Gabe is just a code word for Gabe and Yvonne, because Yvonne is Gabe's partner in all of his research, all of his work, and has been so for more than 50 years. Together, they've done an enormous amount of work. In terms of teaching, Gabe's been recognized with the Distinguished Teacher of Art History Award of the College Art Association. That was awarded in 2012. That's a lifetime award to recognize true greatness in the teaching of art history. But he's won many other awards. I can just mention the Guggenheim Fellowship, the Regents Fellow of the Smithsonian Institution. He's a Chevalier de l'Ordre des Arts et Lettres, awarded by the French government, noting that the French have taken notice of Gabe's contributions as well. There's a long list of exhibitions and books that Gabe has been involved with, and we're going to be highlighting a couple of those during our discussion today. But in Minneapolis, most recently, apart from our show upstairs of work from the Weisberg collection, you may have seen the right before COVID, the beautiful show of B.J.O. Nordfeld at the Weizmann Museum at the University of Minnesota. And one of the reasons I point that one out is A, it was gorgeous, and B, it shows that Gabe does not just stick to one narrow specialty. That the Weisbergs together work far and wide, and though they're known for realism, especially, they've made great contributions in other fields such as Japanism, and I mentioned Nordfeld here, and the art market of the 19th century, and it's quite a range that they deal with. So, having said all this, what I really want you to know is that Gabe and Yvonne are wonderful people, and they
Really?
yes,
Good.
I'm going to tell you something. That when I arrived at the museum here in 2009, the first show that was on is one that we're going to be talking about later, and it was an earlier show of the Weisbergs collection that they did with Lisa Michaud, who's a former curator here at MIA. And while I was looking at this show and talking to Gabe and Yvonne and listening to their discussions with the public, I realized that I had encountered the perfect collectors. They were knowledgeable, they were passionate, and they're generous. And it's not that often that you find people who are like that. And it's been a real pleasure to get to know them and to work with them on this project. So with that, let's move into it. So the word Barbara gave us a quick thumbnail glance at what realism is, but I thought we ought to go into it a little bit further for those in the audience who are not really familiar with it. I start with a couple of drawings from the Weisbergs collection, a couple of French drawings, and maybe you'd like to say a couple of words about what is realism and why it became important.
Well, realism is a very large and committed interest in the people of the country that the artist represents, such as Milcendeau on the left or Léon Lhermitte on the right. And there were hundreds of realist artists. Only a few of them were known today. The question that we raise is, why were these artists allowed to disappear? What happened? Well, they were bypassed by elite art of cubism, fauvism, surrealism, and that shoved the realists into nowhere land. But if you go to France and search for realism and dig out these names, as Yvonne and I did many times, you will find that these artists that we began collecting are really significant figures in their own right.
Yeah, if you go to the regional museums, you see major pictures by these artists, and
many of these artists didn't do paintings.
Yeah,
they were committed to black and white. They were committed to drawings.
Mm.
They believed that drawings should be independent. By that I mean not studies for something else. And many of the objects in the show are independent drawings, works of art finished, completed, and done. And you will find many of these, not only in the exhibition upstairs, but if you go to France and dig a little bit, you'd find some of them represented with dealers or in regional shows.
And you do a lot of digging. We've mentioned the French artists, but you also collect Belgian artists.
Yeah, Belgian art was introduced to us by a marvelous curator, dealer in Brussels by the name of Maurice Verne. a survivor of the Holocaust. And he believed in the art of realism. And eventually we got around to understanding what realism was in Belgium. But there was realism also in many other countries. It wasn't just Belgium. It wasn't just France. It was Germany. It was England. The realist tradition was everywhere. And perhaps it'll come back in a forceful way someday.
Well, you can say that the best known for everybody here is Courbet,
Yeah,
who painted big,
right,
so is well known.
yes.
And all the other artists, well, they're not. Bonvin painted small pictures.
Yeah.
So it wasn't, and it wasn't. Courbet is we have a friend who wrote a book about Courbet, who said he was the most, how did you call him? I mean, he really presented himself.
Yes, well, that's what I was going to say. He's self-promoter.
A self-promoter.
Yeah.
While Bonvin and the others were wonderful artists, but didn't promote their work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I want to add about realism. France was very influenced by Dutch art.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially.
I mean, there's several books on that. The artists in Holland were really looked at by the French artists.
Yes.
And they visited, and they went there.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you think of early period, the 17th century, Le Nain.
Yeah.
They also painted realism.
Yes.
It's only afterwards, in the 18th century, that they painted the rich. They painted the.
I think Stephen Ostro would agree with that.
What?
One of the things that may cause realism to have a harder time in the 21st century is that it has a somber palette, and the colors are often muted. And I wonder if that's something that's just a coincidence in your collection.
It's muted for many reasons, but one of the principal ones is the artists were not oil painters.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes they were terrible oil painters.
Yeah.
But they could express themselves best in chalk and charcoal, and occasionally in pastels. Such is the case with Adolf Appian. Now, he was a painter who painted on a large scale, but his large scale paintings are frankly very boring. But his drawings, as the one on the screen, they're lyrical, they're intimate, and he's an artist that should be more deeply appreciated and studied than he has been. Many of these artists remain largely unknown in the United States. And I hope somebody asks me the question, why is that? Well, the reason is students are not trained to look at these. And they have no inquisitiveness on their own, but they should.
When you look, this Appian is the Weisberg collection is so large that we presented it in two tranches. So what we did 1830 to 1900, and then 1900 to 1930, which is up down. The Appian was in the first round. I hope you got a chance to look at it, because it's just an exquisite drawing with the artist using all kinds of techniques and by drawing things that are detailed, drawing things that are very, very broad, sometimes smudging his charcoal, sometimes scratching into the surface. And so for instance, the reflections on the water that you have there are just a marvel to behold. And it's one of my favorites.
The Antoine Boulon is unusual. He was rather a forceful oil painter, slapdashing, producing works. This is a quiet, intimate charcoal study, which we found in Paris at the flea market. People will probably say, what's the flea market? You get fleas there? No, you go there and you find works of art sometimes that have been bypassed for prices that are inexpensive. And this was the case with the Boulon drawing. It is a wonderful drawing by a very significant artist.
You were talking about some of the leaders and talking about the personality contrast between Bonvin and Courbet there, and then later Ribot sort of picked up the torch. But you also mentioned Dutch art, and one of my favorite drawings in the entire collection is the self-portrait by Bonvin, and it reminds me so much of my dear artist Rembrandt, and the way he painted his self-portraits in part shadow and with a little bit of mystery. And it's also on a very intimate scale. This drawing's about so big. So all that wonderfulness that you're seeing there on the screen gets compacted into this little tiny package that's just a delight.
Now, Ribot is an artist that most everyone in this room never heard about. He is a very great artist, painter, draftsman, in black and white and in color. He really lived in the wrong century. He should have lived in the 17th rather than the 19th. But recently there was a major retrospective exhibition on Ribot in France in 3 provincial museums with a very strong and good catalog that made the case for the artist being wonderful, significant, and moving. He's a very passionate figure. Was he collected in the 19th century? Yes, he was. Was he promoted by dealers? Yes. A dealer by the name of Bernheim Jean, still in existence in Paris, promoted Ribot. Ribot will come back someday. I don't know when, and I'm not sure it'll be in the United States.
With regard to Bonvin, it should be said that Gabe is the world's expert on this artist, and Gabe and Yvonne worked assiduously on a catalog that was published in 1979, I believe. And so if you go to an auction today and there's Bonvin material in the auction, it'll often say this, this has been authenticated by Gabe Weisberg, because you probably can't sell a Bonvin without Gabe's imprimatur saying this one's right. So this is one of the great contributions to art history for.
Well, this self-portrait, didn't this come through a sale?
Perhaps, I don't remember.
Should remember.
That's why we're
Maybe.
That's why we recorded in the book.
Yes.
Go look it up. So this is just a sampling of some of the drawings that are on view, and or that have been on view from the Weisbergs collection. But the reason we put them up is that the question arises: did the realist artist find acceptance in the Paris salons? And the answer is
yes.
Yes, they did.
They won awards.
All of these won major awards.
They were
in salon
sometimes
painting.
purchased by the state, but there were a lot of independent individuals who collected their works.
What kind of people?
Wealthy,
Wealthy?
sometimes.
Okay. Did people of modest means collect them too? Did people of modest means collect them too?
Yes. But as the world passed and more prominent achievements were developed in terms of what we now call modernism, collectors disappeared for these artists and left them stranded. In the lower right corner is a wonderful study by Jules Breton. I'll tell you a story. When we first became interested in Jules Breton, we could buy a Breton for a song, but nothing. Now, the prices are astronomical. Is he a good artist? No, not just good. He's a great artist. And this is a sketch for a painting in Dublin. The gleaners of Curator. Gleaners go into the fields after the harvest and pick up what's left. And this is actually a study of one of the figures, a figure that became Jules Breton's wife. Years ago, Yvonne and I were in Washington, and a friend of ours told us about a marvelous Jules Breton drawing in one of the dealers in Washington. Well, we didn't have much money then. I didn't have a decent job, but we scurried over and we bought it with a dealer. And it's a great drawing. And the dealer sold it for a good price. And we made some money on it. But we're very sorry that we lost the drawing. We should have held on to it, should have bought the dealer out. And it would have,
Okay, come on. That's true. It's a beautiful drawing.
it's a beautiful drawing.
Do you know where it is now?
Might be here in Minneapolis.
Oh,
No, I'm serious, with a private collector.
Yeah.
So that's a tidbit.
let's go find it.
Yeah.
One of the question that is often raised is whether the realists continue to have influence today or have descendants in the art world who are still working in a similar vein. And you mentioned some to me that you admire, and that actually a couple of our personal friends are have been.
Well, Harvey Dinestein was a wonderful artist. He passed away last year, maybe 6 or 10 months ago. He was a very good friend. And he lived and worked in Brooklyn. He was a thoroughgoing New Yorker. He never left, but he was a teacher also at the Art Students League, and a remarkably good teacher. That's his self-portrait. He's a very good craftsman, and he became a close friend. And we're sorry that he's no longer with us. The next images by Bert Silverman, who is still functioning. He's about 95, and he lives in New York. It's one of his drawings. That's Bert in the self-portrait on the right. They linked up with the past, and they pushed realism into the future. And they are worthy of independent exhibitions.
It's easy to mistake his painted self-portrait as for a photograph because he's holding a camera.
That's right.
Well, he did. Many of these artists were into photography, and many of them used photographs to help them develop their imagery.
As were the 19th century artists.
We'll talk about that later when we get to Brad Radical's painting.
That one thing that when we were talking about this earlier, I also think about artists who are famous today, who are greatly influenced by the work of the realists, and particularly photographers who are especially the ones who are looking at the misery years of the Depression. And for instance, here I have this image that Walker Evans made of a woman who with her husband was a farmer. And on the right is a work by Charles White, a very prominent African American artist. And I think that there are actually a lot of African American artists working in this vein today, and there are people who are who have been historically marginalized who are working in this vein, and people are taking another look at this art as they try to diversify collections. And there's a lot of use of the realist tradition to say, we're here, we're present, we're part of your world. And so I think that realism is still serving much of the same function it served in the 19th century today.
Well, I think if you know about, there's several schools that teach in a manner that the Academy did.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of real studies. And we have two friends who are here from the atelier, and there's an atelier in Italy, in Florence, and so it's a tradition that's really not coming back again in a big way.
Yes,
and it's nice to know. Even École des Beaux-Arts for a long time didn't teach drawing anymore.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And people got upset, and a lot of students came back and said, "Hey, you have to teach us how to paint, how to draw."
Yeah.
And so they brought it back. They brought a professor who could do it. Yeah. So that's nice to know.
Yeah. Gabe and Yvonne have been researching together for how many years? 50 some odd?
About 60 years.
No,
Yeah.
not 60.
And they're
55.
and
No.
so in your research, why did you choose realism? You started as an artist yourself.
Well, because I began as an artist. And these are 3 of my drawings, which are now in the collection of the MIA. They were done when I was about 18 or 19. They're good, but they're not great. And that's something you have to figure out for yourself. Because I had the opportunity to become an artist. And I said to myself, forget it. You're just not going to make it. But I enjoyed drawing with the study of my mother and 2 portrait heads of my father. They were not artists themselves. My mother was an English teacher at high school, a very good teacher. My father was a CPA. Maybe that's why I hate accounting, but
Me too. So their adventures take them all over the place, and we have pictures of Gabe on the trail, and of course it's Yvonne who's behind the camera.
Yep.
And so here you are at the archives in Paris. And
Yeah, les Archives de Paris,
yes,
where if you want to learn about art sales,
yes,
auction houses, dealers, you go there because they have all the archives of the gallery owners and so on, and a notary, and so it's a gold mine. I mean, it's amazing.
and is it highly accessible?
Well, you have to take the.
Do you have to show up with a letter?
You have to show up with a letter the first time.
Yeah.
But no, it's open to everybody.
Yeah.
And you can do genealogy, all the research on genealogy. So people go there just to find about their ancestors and so on and so forth.
And of course, that's an important part of art history is
That's
doing
right.
genealogy.
That's right. And you can go there on the tramway. It's right in front of us.
around Paris.
That's right. So we were there many times, yes.
And that's somebody you know inside one of the archives,
In the National Archives.
National Archives.
National Archives.
And
Well,
so-
there you have 2 National Archives.
Yeah.
One is in Paris itself,
yes.
in the center of town, and they built something at Pierrefitte, which is just outside of Paris, a brand new building. And for the later period, I think that the first one goes about 1857, 1860,
Yeah.
and then the more modern documents are in the new place. So
Yeah.
it's a
And so
bit-
you can see these 2 are archive rats, but they also look at the real thing. So
Yeah.
here's Gabe ignoring the death of Sardanapalus by Delacroix in the Louvre. We wanted a picture from the Orsay, which is one of your haunts, and unfortunately we didn't come up with that. Here's the École des Beaux-Arts, which is apparently
Which
continuing.
has a very good library on its own
Yeah,
for academic artists and artists that were trained at the École des Beaux-Arts, and it's worth visiting.
and there are all the painters for which the artist got a prize there, so you can see what
Are they arranged in a gallery, or do you go to special storage to see
you have
them?
the special storage.
Special
Yeah.
tour.
And so you make an appointment in advance to
That's
do
right.
something like that. But it's got to be interesting because you
Very.
see what the academic imprint was at any given moment. And some museums that some of us have probably never visited.
Well, this is in the northern part of France, and we visited because they had a retrospective of the works of Charles Milcendeau when we visited there, who is one of the great artists in our collection, we think, but it's a museum underground.
Are there a lot of these spectacular regional museums? Or is it
Yes.
pretty unusual?
Yes, there are a number of them.
And
Let's
They're
go
very
back.
different from when we started going to France doing the research. Even in Avignon and other well-known places, the museums were in very bad shape. I remember going to, was it Avignon? And we went to the reserve and the rain was coming down. I mean, it was just a mess. Now all of them have been remodeled, taken care of, and it's amazing what the French have done, really.
this looks like they really spent some money on this place. Yeah.
And it's also a special place for the Vendée, for the history of and I don't know all the details, but Historien de la Vendée, you know, there was at the time in the French 19th century, a lot of between Catholic and Protestant, and the Vendée was so it's also a memorial for the history of the Vendée, which is on the west coast of France, near Nantes,
Yes.
or south of Nantes.
Yeah.
And it's very prominent place.
What Gabe mentioned Milcendeau as a prominent artist in their collection. It was from this region, and we'll get back to him in a little while. We'll get back to him quickly because here's his house, another museum.
When we were first, this is an artist I never knew about in my earlier work. It's an artist that we noticed in a gallery in Paris, and one of the dealers said, you know, there's a small museum dedicated to Milcendeau in Soulanges. And Yvonne and I immediately got in the car and went there. This is what we found. This is a studio house. And next.
We'll get back. We'll get back. It'll come back. So
Milcendeau, they rebuilt the museum, and we rebuilt our awareness of who he was and what he represented. And we'll come back to him in a little bit.
Yeah. And one of the reasons we have this slide up is that it's not just contracts and inventories and this kind of thing that you find in the archives in Paris. There's all kinds of things. And so photographs, and you can see the interrelationships between artists by knowing who went to school together, for instance. Yeah.
Right.
And
well, the Julian Academy was a private school.
Yes.
And it had a school and courses for men, but also women who were not allowed to go to the École des Beaux-Arts until 1897. So they went to Julian.
Yeah.
And a lot of like Bouguereau and a lot of artists, very well-known artists, taught there. And so we did a lot of research. We had a chance to meet the last teacher, really, Mr. Del Debut, who had taught sculpture. And when we did an exhibition on the Julian Academy in New York, we really worked with him. He was fabulous. And so he had all the photographs. He had a lot of the works done by the artists, the women artists, who came from all over the world. We know of at least 2 or 3 women from Minnesota who studied at the Académie Julian. So
yeah, great. Yeah. Did their archive go anywhere?
I think now the son of Mr. Del Debut gave the archives to the Bibliothèque Nationale.
Yeah.
So it's safe.
Yeah.
And we have a lot of archives.
Well, Yvonne's, while we're talking about archives, the Weisbergs have substantial personal archives that they've accumulated, and sometimes they've gotten from other people who accumulated their archives and wanted them to be in good hands with other scholars. And now the Weisbergs are in the process of transferring their archives to institutions to try and make sure they're available to scholars in the future. And this is, I guess you're wrapping and packing this week. Yeah.
We're pretty well packed
Just
up,
about.
especially on Rebo.
Yeah.
We have an extraordinary documentation on Rebo. This is a little bit different. I was working on Jane Gabriel.
Yeah.
She's one of the performers, dancers at the Moulin Rouge and other cabarets during the 1890s in Paris. And in order to do research on Jane Gabriel, it was difficult because there's no family left, at least which we could find. So what did we do? We went to the current day Moulin Rouge. That was very interesting research.
A lot of legwork involved.
Ooh. But their original archives were burned, and they developed a secondary archives, which we had a chance to go through, probably wondering what did we find. Well, we found the minutes of performances, the catalogs of performances, which starred Jane Gabriel with others, which is very important. And we found some photographs there, and we were greeted with open arms, which was very helpful. One of the drawings in our collection is not on Jane Gabriel, but on Yvette Gilbert, who was a performer in the Café Concert in Paris. And we have a drawing of her. It's a little different than what we normally collect
What,
of her performing on stage by Georges Despaignat. Now, Despaignat was not a realist. He became an abstractionist who worked with the foes. That's where his fame lies. But we found this very early drawing of Yvette Gilbert performing. And I think it's one of the better drawings that we have, which is a little different from what we normally collected.
one of the things that I always looked at this drawing and I thought, well, why is she so static? You know, and especially when you see the program where she's going like this. It turns out that the watercolor is actually a much more accurate representation than the advertisement.
Yeah.
Because she had a habit of standing on stage in her signature long black gloves and almost grunting and growling her performance. She wasn't the kind of stage singer you would normally think of if you watch the movies about Toulouse-Lautrec or whatever.
That's right.
Yeah.
Right. And you can still, we have a disc CD, I think. You can still hear her voice.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
fantastic.
And she wrote the history of my life. So it's interesting because of the whole history of the moment and the people she met and so on. So
Fabulous.
yeah.
Actually, I saw a little clip on YouTube. Actually, that's one of the
Okay.
things you can see. And speaking of online resources, this is one that Gabe and Yvonne introduced me to during our research, and it was a godsend during COVID. We were doing this project at a time where we couldn't meet, and access to libraries was limited, and we couldn't travel. And
You do know one thing, Tom, we're turning you into a 19th century scholar, so just drop the other stuff that you were doing.
I'm not ready to be dragged into the future of the 19th century. I'm more of a 17th century and 16th century guy. But Yvonne really was the one, I guess, who dragged me into the 21st century with this resource from the Bibliothèque Nationale Française. They've scanned millions of books and documents and images and whatnot, and you can go onto their website. And here's an instance of using it. The Weisbergs have this drawing of a man and woman in a lamplit surroundings, and it's by an artist named Charles Milcendeau. And how was I going to figure out what the heck this thing is? And I didn't really know where to go, but Yvonne mentioned this, and I wound up being able to find books that have been illustrated by Bida, and was able to read all the books or look at them, scan them until I found the illustration, and found out the whole story behind the image. And it just so happens that the fellow's kind of a jerk, because he was dating a very modest woman that we see here who does needlework, but he dumped her for a woman who had lots of money and finery. And one day he realized that one of the baubles that the rich woman had was a pillowcase very elaborately stitched by the one who was the poor woman. So that's what we see. And sometimes you get to do research in other places, but the word is only order the croissant.
Yeah, the train bleu, yeah.
The food was terrible, but the art was great. So you go there to see the art, have a cup of coffee, but don't get a meal because it's not very good.
So this is in the Gare de Lyon, and this is some of the kind of work that Gabe and Yvonne are tracking down, and they get to track it down in fun places. And here's an instance of the art in the train station. And where are we here? I've forgotten where we are.
Gare de l'Est.
Gare de l'Est.
Yeah.
Okay, there we are.
And it's by an American artist.
It's really quite a strong painting, and you need to look at it carefully.
I feel like Norman Rockwell had a good look at
Yeah,
that.
looks
that's
like
right.
that.
That's right.
And the answer to that is, so what?
Here's a place where the Weisbergs went and searched out this unassuming wood carving that you see way up on high on the wall. And the reason they went looking for it was that this drawing, one of my favorites in the collection, is of that object. And I'll just say it. It took me a while to realize that when you're looking at this picture, you're actually, that what you see out to is not the street on this level. You're looking down into that street. And what's happened is in the current surroundings, the floor has been removed. So somebody had built in a sort of a mezzanine level to create an attic, and so the thing wound up in the attic. But if at the very left you can see there's a door, and on that the stones that are rising up, you can see a white dot on the one that's 2 above the plants, and that must have been the support for where the floor was built in. And that's where the state where Juá saw it, and then the floor was removed. And now you see what it looks like. And so Juá took this thing and turned it into an incredibly monumental kind of romantic object. That advanced without my
Now, Brad should really be shocked now. We also did work on some of the major painters of the time, one of whom was Jean-Léon Gérôme, and then one of his best students, Jules Alexis Meunier. For some of you wandering through the galleries of the MIA, this painting is now here on loan from the Brad Radical collection, and Brad's in the audience. It is a wonderful painting by an artist who was a significant figure in the 1890s and later. And when we get a little bit later on, could I have the next images?
Yeah. Just mention going to visit their home and why
Well,
the
that's right.
Gérôme is here.
We have some images that, here it is. Somebody was concerned with, did these artists relate to photographs? Well, this is a strange case because this artist, Meunier, was himself a first-rate photographer. He took photographs in and around his village in Coulevent, near Vesoul in France, and he used these photographs to help him develop his painting on the left. We hunted this down in the little village of Coulevent, and I'll tell you a story that goes with this. We had known about the studio of Meunier for a long time, and we went there and we thought, oh boy, they're going to let us in. Well, the owner of this situation, who lived in a building that was once owned by Jean-Léon Gérôme, didn't want to talk to us at all. So what did we do? We went to the mayor of the city, of the village, and we got her to talk to this turkey. And we got in. And when we got in, what did we find? Well, it took 10 trips or so to Coulevent. Finally, he admitted us upstairs to the photographic studio. Well, it wasn't a photo studio that was arranged in any order. It was helter-skelter, with glass plate negatives everywhere, with emulsion peeling off. But the glass plate negatives related to paintings that Meunier had done. And so we were able to arrange taking them with us, getting them properly developed, and using them in some of our research. Eventually we returned the glass plate negatives to the family. But it was an experience that Yvonne and I will never forget, because it was a studio that was pristine. It had not changed since the death of Meunier in 1942. One of the sources that allowed us to know more about the painting that's in Brad's collection.
And by the way, thank you for the wonderful loan. It's a beautiful picture, and
Yeah.
I hope you'll see it this afternoon.
Did you hear that?
What about, did they have pastels there too?
Did they have
Did he
what?
have pastels remaining from Meunier there as well?
Yeah, there was one, he opened a closet, Monsieur Millier, and he said, oh, I have something to show you, when he got out of pastel. And he said, oh, it's very dusty and so on. And he went like this with a
It was an unfixed pastel. And he said, here it is. Do you like it? I was completely blown away. I said, yeah, it's great. What are you going to say?
We couldn't stop it.
Yeah.
But he was a writing specialist. So he worked in Paris for the court.
Yeah.
And anytime they had to verify a signature for all kinds of documents.
And
So
he became a very good friend of ours. Very
at
good.
first he didn't want to talk to us.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah.
So, Gabe and Yvonne have been involved in a lot of exhibitions. And one of the early ones was in 1981 called The Realist Tradition, which was a huge show that that sort of redefined the field and showed people what was available and how extensive the realist tradition really was. And here's a photo from opening night in Brooklyn.
In the middle with the bow tie is H.W. Jansen.
Did any of you have Jansen in college? Yeah.
Well, Stephen and I know who Jansen is. Passed away a long time ago, but he was a great art historian and very generous and helpful to his students and friends. On the left is somebody you might know, and on the right, someone else who you might know. And the other two gentlemen were gallery dealers in New York. This is the installation at the Brooklyn Museum. This is one of the strongest paintings which announced the show by Jules Breton, The Fire in the Haystack.
So fast forwarding to 2010,
Yeah.
Illusions of Reality, we're still on realism.
Which is a wonderful exhibition, we think. Very controversial because we did something that no one else had ever tried to do. Show the relationship between photography, motion picture, and paintings.
And there's a miniature Gabe.
Yeah.
This is our wonderful colleague, Anna Maria von Bonesdorf. In the back is a great painting by Bastien Lepage that Kristen Mockholm should know, since its
Yeah, Milwaukee.
home is in Milwaukee. And the upper left is a still from a motion picture. And beneath it, the painting that we think was partly inspired by the film. So filmmakers and painters were influencing one another. It's something that has not been adequately thought about or researched in the field of art history at all. Next.
We looked at a lot of movies.
Yeah.
And France, Paris has several fantastic repository of movies. So we spent a lot of time looking and also marking, trying to stop watching a movie to get the scene, like this one, for example, from Zola and so on and so forth.
And are they shown on a thing that's sort of the size of a microfilm reader or something, or do you see them on a big screen?
No, not on a big screen.
Yeah.
TV or
Have they been digitized?
Yes.
Yes.
It's an amazing resource.
One of the things I think is amazing about these slides is that you see that when you compare this installation here, which it looks very austere compared to your presentations in these.
And then another relationship between film and paintings.
And writings and the novels by Zola, especially, for example.
And so this show was at the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam, and then it went to the National Museum in Helsinki. And partly because of that relationship, the Helsinki came back to the Weisbergs for Japanimania.
Yeah.
We had a hard time figuring out what to call this show. We came up with Japanomania because Japanese art, Japanese culture influenced the Scandinavian countries as much as Japanese art influenced England or France or
Or
Belgium
America.
a little earlier.
Yeah.
And this is Anna Maria with someone you know, and the president of Finland,
Who's an art historian?
who was
Yeah,
an art historian.
Yeah.
And she opened every exhibition they had at the museum. She always came to give a talk. Or
You think we
to,
could have a president in here in the United States that would be forcibly
That's fun, maybe.
interested in art history? Even the prince in waiting doesn't say anything.
And here you're with a colleague that you worked on the program on the show.
And this is one of our dear friends in Paris, Jane Roberts, a wonderful dealer from whom we got a number of works. We went together to see the first of the Rebo shows in a small museum just outside Paris. And there she is with me. And then the second Rebo show just took place about a year ago.
So this is a good point in transitioning to collecting, because Jane Roberts is one of your great sources, and perhaps we can tell your fans present what the role of this drawing is in your collection.
Well, it's the first drawing we bought ever by François Bonvin. You probably wonder how we ever found it. Well, they sent out a catalog from Hazlitt and Company in London.
Very fine, old, established dealership.
And it arrived when we were in Switzerland with the family. And my mother got on the phone and
In other words, it arrived back home.
better get to England. There's a Bonvin for sale. I said, okay. And we got there and we bought it. And it wasn't much money because Bonvin at the time was relegated to nowhere. But I'm happy we have it in our collection. And it's, we think, a superb, very moving portrait of an individual brought into the artist's studio and drawn. And there are a number of other drawings by Bonvin of this figure that we also have seen, but not necessarily for sale.
So we saw Jane Roberts before, but the Weisbergs have had a lot of wonderful relationships with dealers over the years. And one of the, as I was sifting through your collection, I realized that that Gallery Fisher Keener or Fisher and Keener individually have been great resources for you. Perhaps you could talk a little bit about this.
Well, they became great friends, and they allowed us to look through the works that they had stored away, and we found a number of drawings that were worth obtaining, and we secured them.
One of the things that you've got to realize is that that cabinet is full of portfolios. So each of those portfolios is again a gold mine.
Yeah.
And so they're just stacks and stacks of drawings in these dealerships. It's not just what you see on the wall in the gallery. You can sit there and go through their bins and see hundreds and hundreds of works of art.
We used to work a lot at Orsay in the documentation.
Yes.
Doing research.
Yes.
And on the way back to where we stayed, we usually stopped at Fisher Keener and looked. And we met them when we were in.
That's Jacques Fisher.
Yeah, Jacques Fisher. We met them when we were in Cleveland because at the time there was a very well-known collector, Mr. Butkin, Noah Butkin in Cleveland. And he introduced us to these people. And
so here's Gabe in conversation.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you get into academia or into the museum world, there are people who look down on dealers a little bit because of their role in commerce, but these people are experts, and the reason they can make a living on it is that they're smart and they know where things are, they know what things are, they know a lot about these artists. And so Jacques Fisher, for instance, filling up all those portfolios, learned a lot along the way. And I'm sure that it was mutually beneficial to
Sure,
have these conversations.
I mean, Jacques went to the flea market.
Yes,
Every time there was a flea market, Saturday, Sunday, Monday.
Yeah.
And one day we saw him leave, and very early in the morning.
Yes.
7 o'clock, even earlier than that, and something under his arm. He had just purchased a Bonvin,
Yeah.
so we just missed it.
So you learn to be the early bird.
Yes.
And I'm a night owl, and I do not get up well in the morning. And Gabe is an early bird, and would like to call me famously a little earlier than I'm used to. But I don't even have to set my alarm clock anymore. It's great. And so here are a few drawings that you bought from Fisher Keener,
Yes.
and maybe you could address a couple of them. Something
Let's
strike
go,
your-
I think the Berto
right in the
in the
middle.
middle comes up in
It'll cut.
another image.
Okay. Well,
No, maybe not.
and this is just a further sampling of things that come from these dealers. So you can see that this is a strong and deep relationship, and as I say, mutually beneficial, collecting wise and in terms of scholarship.
And you can go back to
Sorry.
There it is.
the first, these two are in the museum already,
Yeah,
Gift.
the Brion.
Yeah.
And
Not this
the Berto. Yes,
in the Berto.
yeah, I haven't, I indicated later of
Yeah, it doesn't
something in the
matter.
museum, yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Ooh.
So-
And this is a marvelous drawing by Gervex on very poor paper. Preliminary drawing, it's not an independent drawing, but it's a drawing that helped him achieve the painting of the civil marriage, which is in the City Hall of Paris in the 19th.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's
I thought it was
okay.
11.
No.
19.
Sorry. So there you can see the painting in situ, and that's still in the
In the Mary.
19th,
Yeah, 19th.
19th or on
And
the
there are a lot of other paintings by other artists,
yes.
not just Gervex, but it's an amazing place which they remodeled completely.
And so the Weisbergs drawing is for that clerk in the foreground. You
Yeah.
can see how this is a long process, and the clerk lost his hair over the years. But I just love that this drawing not only shows this modest, inconspicuous guy who's probably just got a very middle class existence, and yet the care that Gervex lavished on this is he's trying to figure out exactly how that left hand and cuff should be by redrawing it on up in the corner.
But what's amazing with the Mary is not just the Mary of the 19th, the Mary of the 11th and the 14th. You have wonderful also murals by very famous artists like Fauvet, and you can see them if you have to call in advance, maybe not. Just walk around. And the Mary of the first arrondissement has wonderful paintings by Albert Bénard.
And so these are places that typical tourists don't go to.
No,
If you're
no, you don't know.
you've got museums in
That's
Paris,
right.
and you're like this because there's so many
Yeah.
people inside. This is a wonderful way to see the city, to go around and visit these city halls and see marvelous 19th century art all by yourself.
On the wall,
essentially.
yeah.
And so we mentioned Charles Milcendeau before, and said we'd come back to him. Here is just a sampling. What do you have, about 14 Milcendeaus now?
14 Milcendeau.
Yeah. So perhaps you could talk a little bit about this artist.
Well, when we did the Realist Tradition exhibition, we knew nothing about this artist. We hadn't heard his name, hadn't seen his work. And it's because we stumbled at Fisher Keener Gallery into a work close to the work on the right lower corner that we became very interested in him. And we began scouring around to see if we could find out as much as we could. Eventually, purchasing the figures in the middle, which if you look carefully, shows you,
Oh, sorry.
no, not
Sorry,
yet,
I thought I had a blow up.
not yet.
Sorry, I just thought I had a bigger.
Shows us how he absorbed the work of Gustave Courbet because he was trained in the École des Beaux-Arts, and his best friends were Georges Rouault and Henri Matisse. But he didn't want to follow their direction. He remained true to himself, to the simple peasant life. That's what he recorded. That's what he did in pastels and black and whites. This is one of the best drawings by Milcendeau I think you'll ever find. And it will one day be in the collection here. We promise.
Thank you, and thank you on behalf of the community, because this is a gorgeous drawing, and I think I do have a blow up of it later, but you'll just see that it's actually quite a moving image, because these are the women and children of a fishing village waiting on a stormy day for the return of their husbands and brothers from their fishing expedition. And of course, that's a terribly hazardous way of life. And Milcendeau was quite attuned to that.
This is visiting that exhibition. And we showed you the building earlier underground. The children were well represented in the installation because they visited it, but there were practically no adults, except Yvonne and myself. Go ahead.
And there's Gabe with one of the drawings that they let to the
show,
show.
Which is in the museum here.
And here's another drawing in the Weisbergs collection of Milcendeau's home. We've seen that photograph before. Let's see, there we go. So there's Gabe with the drawing, and there is Milcendeau's home, and there's the close-up comparison, and you can see how Milcendeau actually altered his view of the home, gave it a higher peak, for instance. But what you can tell, it's really the same building, partly because of that unusual doorway with the pointed arch and the faux painted stonework around the doorway.
And the inside is covered with tiles, which he painted himself. And so it's like a Spanish.
He had traveled abroad and seen this Moorish architecture and wanted to bring it back to his home. So here's the blow up of the one that I was talking about with the women and children. And as you can see, the expressions.
He's ripe for a major retrospective in the United States.
In Minneapolis, because you have the largest collection of Milcendeau in the United States.
In Minneapolis. In the United States, you'd have to get other museums involved.
Yeah.
But he's a very great artist. And
so here's another one of the Weisbergs fishing holes, the Gallery Spherne in Brussels, that was an important provider for some of your Belgian work.
What?
Yeah. So you bought several things from Spherne. Did you develop a relationship with him, or?
Yeah, we had a very close relationship.
Yeah.
Very close, and he was a very good.
He loved Constantin Meunier, and he did an exhibition, at least. Constantin Meunier,
yes,
the Belgian artist, and so that's where we found a lot of his.
And then there's
work.
The François Maréchal Minor, where I met Josie one day as she was taking a tour around, pointed out a couple of things. But it's a wonderful drawing.
Yeah, it actually, we put it right on line of sight as you enter the door, because it's such a powerful image. And next to it is an unusual one for your collection, the Adrian de Witte. It's an allegorical image of
the country.
Belgium, revealing the need to care for the poor.
He was a director at the art school in Liège.
Maybe, or Antwerp.
Oh, Liège.
Yeah, could be.
And the Weisbergs gave that to the museum a few years ago, and we had nothing by de Witte before that. And oddly enough, about 2 months later, a collector contacted me and gave me 9 prints by the same artist. And so you created some good juju for us, and I appreciate it. Gallery Proutet. So the other 2 galleries, Spherne and Fischer-Kiener, are gone. And I wanted to be sure to include some of the Weisbergs sources that are still available to you. such as the Galerie Proutet in Paris. Are there any, we talked before about the beautiful Appian above,
Right.
and
But the Musée I already, before that, you already own a wonderful
yes, beautiful one.
Appian.
Yeah, very
Which-
large one.
Very large one,
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
Yeah.
And
So now you'll have three.
yeah, and and then the Weisbergs have given us 4 drawings by Augustin Lermite, whose work you see in the middle of the weaver in his with his wife in their workshop. And of course, I love this joie because these poor gargoyles look like they've been sitting in the rain for 1,000 years.
They have.
And a younger the Proutet Gallery has been in business for probably a century. And
sure.
yeah, and they're
Now the 2 daughters are,
Yeah,
the older
so-
man is
and they're
gone.
the granddaughters because they're into their 3rd and maybe 4th generation now.
Yeah.
Um,
On
and,
Rue de Seine.
and Neus is a younger man who's developed into quite a formidable dealer.
Yeah.
Did you want to mention any of these? Any single one out?
Well, Boutet de Monvel became a very famous Art Deco portrait painter. This
The middle one,
of the middle one.
Yeah.
is
the old woman.
the old woman. It's done at the beginning of his career. And it's very touching. Next to it is a
Sorry.
Jean Barreau.
Oh, there. Oh, just go there.
Finding drawings by Jean Barreau are very difficult. But this one is one of the standouts in relationship to the mad inmates of the hotel they were staying in Paris. Curious because he has his pocket stuffed with what looks like articles. And perhaps he's an art historian.
He's lost his mind.
Having a bad day. But
So the painting is lost, we don't know where it is.
Yeah, that's the Weisbergs have one of the few tangible survivors from the creation of that painting, and which is known through prints such as the one that you see to your right.
Go ahead.
Armstrong Fine Art in Chicago, Bernard DeRoy.
Yeah.
Good friend of yours.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And we've, when you had the print fair, he used to come every year.
Yes.
Not anymore, but he still comes to Minneapolis. And last time he came, he had a showing in at one of the downtown hotel, and we bought the one branched, the one on the left. That's one of the last things we bought from him. And
which places us in the audience at a cabaret.
that's right.
Yeah,
That's right.
wonderful.
And the one on the right is really a preparatory drawing for a book cover.
Yeah, and that it's hard to see in the slide, but it's the drawing is in the show upstairs. And when you're up there looking at it, you kind of move around and get at an angle that's gold, that yellowish tan color that you see there is actually gilding, and it's a exquisite work, with very, very subtly done.
The city of Nancy has a museum, a historical museum really, where you have book covers by the most famous artists. And it's a fabulous place too.
In Nancy.
In Nancy.
This is one of the galleries at the Clean Flea Market, where we purchased the painting on the right by Charles Milcendeau.
And you can see the painting on the floor in the photograph, down the lower right.
That has an interesting story behind it. Because when we got it, we took it to a dealer friend of ours, and she said, "You got to have it cleaned." I got it cleaned, and you know what? It didn't change.
Luckily. Yeah,
It was cleaned.
it was okay.
And this is the Gleaners of Curator with the Jules Breton. You see the figure in the middle right?
And this is another flea market find.
No, that was an auction.
Auction sale.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, we have to change the provenance then.
I think
Get to work.
Okay.
Okay. And this is a gem by Henri Vivier. And who is Henri Vivier? He was a first-rate jeweler and a great collection of Japanese art.
And Rembrandt prints.
Yes?
Yes. And
This is,
French
this
portraits.
is a little
Yeah.
drawing that we found at the flea market and purchased it for 10 francs.
It is the sweetest
Franks.
drawing, I tell you.
Yeah,
Which were 6 for $1.
yeah.
And guess who?
Yes, who? So, I wanted, one of the things that's wonderful about Gabe is that he's very encouraging, to other collectors. And, Brad, whom you see there with Gabe, has been a star student in that he's developed a beautiful collection of paintings in this field of his own. And as I mentioned, one is on loan to us now. It's a terrific collection, and Gabe was instrumental in writing the catalog of the collection as well, showing a lot of encouragement. And here they are at the flea market together. Did you make any flea market finds, or how's it going? Yeah, I purchased one there. Good job. Okay. So here's the Mounier that Gabe
We
was
talked
talking
about that
yeah.
earlier.
And
We probably should stop because it's getting late.
well, I think that we ought to cover a couple of things.
Yeah.
I think that one thing is that these are people who have been instrumental in developing the Weisbergs' engagement with Mia. And to the left, you see Evan Maurer, who very unfortunately passed away last week. And then Lisa Michaud, who is the curator here, who engaged with Gabe and Yvonne and was actually a student of Gabe's.
She got her PhD with me.
And
Wrote a PhD on the print collection
yeah,
and its formation.
yeah.
So
And Evan, of course, was a very enthusiastic and welcoming director.
Yeah.
And he helped tremendously with the art history aspect of my career because he was on dissertation committees for a number of my PhD students, which was great because he was in agony health-wise when that occurred.
he was the first. We came to our apartment, and we showed him what we had on the walls, and he said, we said, well, we'd like to give it to the museum. And they both agreed, fine, great, wonderful.
Yeah.
And from then on,
Thank goodness.
it's been, I mean, every year, every director has continued to be welcoming. And
So I mentioned earlier the exhibition that it was on when I arrived at the museum that Lisa and Gabe had done together, the expanding the boundaries. This is the catalog with the Weisbergs drawing that's on the cover. And to show you how personal the relationship becomes, this is a beautiful pastel sketch portrait of the child of an artist that the Weisbergs gave in memory of Lisa's late husband, Michael, who we sadly lost way too early. Now we have the current exhibition, and we've done an extensive online catalog of the work. And this, although it's nice to have something on your coffee table, the advantage of this book is that it is available for free to people worldwide. And it was amazing how many different countries were tapping into this book within the first month of its going live online. And it was hell to put together. But we're in the end, I think the result is pretty good. And it had a nice review in the Journal for 19th Century Art, the online journal.
that's right.
And certainly, Yvonne and I want to thank all of you for coming. I want to thank the MIA for giving us a welcoming and being supportive over the years. And for Tom, because he's done the yeoman service in making the collection come alive in the installation and in the catalog. And as I said earlier, he really is a 19th century person now.
Okay,
And we want to thank also our friend Winifred for writing the wonderful article for the catalog,
yes,
and all the people who worked on the show, who installed the show,
Yep.
and Marla Kinney, who
Yes.
was the editor.
yes.
And I don't know if she's here, but she's a wonderful, really
many hands touched this project, and,
Yeah, that's
and
right.
people really
And,
gave it their all.
And for us to know that the collection, when we're not in this world anymore, found a nice home and people will be able to enjoy their works, we're,
Yeah.
very grateful for this.
Winifred's contribution to the catalog, Winifred's here, it's wave to everybody, Winifred, there we go. Is essentially the fuller biography of Gabe and Yvonne, and it's really a delightful reading and touches on a lot of things that we couldn't get to here today. So it's a great way to continue to learn about Gabe and Yvonne's life. So thank you very much.
And now, if
I want
any of you have
Wait. Yes,
Can I? Sorry, go ahead.
go ahead.
be my guest.
Okay, I just want to say some thank yous because the
Yes,
Weisbergs have already given many works of art to Mia. And the collection is promised, but they're already being very generous in giving things to us. We could already tell many stories out of our collection because of the Weisbergs. For instance, the forerunners of the realist movement, academic versus realist art. The Weisbergs have collected things that aren't in their niche because they often highlight the aspects of the work that they collect. So you can, you just see this comparison of the she flower with the wonderful Bonvin painting, and you know the complete difference between academic and realist art in an instant. The interest in local tradition, the interest in local scenery, working people, working women, the cottage industry in the era of industrialization, the plight of the poor, all these things, the seductions of Paris, this marvelous image of a prostitute on the left, the preparatory drawing and the poster that it became for the 1900 World's Fair. And that's a repeat, I'm sorry. And then I'd just like to announce that next week the trustees of the museum are going to be signing off on another wonderful gift from the Weisbergs of these 4 drawings, some of which have been addressed today. And I just can't thank you enough. It's been an honor to work with you, and it's a pleasure to become
same here.
a true friend.
Oh,
And,
thank you.
And so thank you for this today. I think the Weisbergs are going to be up in the galleries, or do we have a few minutes for Q&A, or do you
There
want
must
to
be
do
some people with questions.
anybody? Any
We said it
questions?
all.
Yes. Oh,
Well, I didn't, what was it?
what's the least you ever paid for a drawing in your collection? What's the most you ever paid?
Well, the Weber was
The
what, 10
Weber-
francs?
10 francs. That's a winner.
And
Love
I
it.
think the Milcendeau of the Fisher, the
Yeah.
women waiting, was
Yeah.
something like,
That was 15,000 euros.
yeah,
Yeah.
12,000. So that was really, we paid
That
it in several
Yeah. Installment.
installments.
But it also shows you that this was really done on a professor's salary.
That's right.
And that this is something that's widely available. Gabe was talking about this not being elite art. It's not elite art in that it wasn't created just for the elite, and it's not available just to the elite. It's really something that is out there. Okay. Yes. Yeah.
You have a situation where you at a flea market found something you liked, but you weren't familiar with the artist, only to learn later that you had a real treasure.
Was there, the
Yes.
question was were you ever at a flea market and saw something that you liked, that attracted you, and you really didn't know what it was, but then maybe bought it and realized that you had bought a treasure?
Yes, that happened often.
Yeah.
We did not often buy works by artists that we knew anything about. That's the key to this. You follow your nose. And in my case, it's a big nose.
It's a nose with a very strong sensors in it too, but one of the things that is remarkable about the Weisbergs collecting is, and their scholarship combined, is that they're often ahead of the game and buying things before other people are interested, and then they start writing articles. Other people get interested, and they can't afford those drawings anymore, and so they have to go on and find somebody else.
That's a very good point. And
Yeah.
that has happened. Now Bonvin is untouchable
For us.
for us.
Yeah.
Jules Breton hopeless for us, except maybe if you pursue the one that I believe is in a private collection here in the town, maybe you can develop something.
Okay, that's a challenge. Any more questions? Yes, in the back.
When was that and how much was on?
When did you buy the Bonvin rag picker and how much did it cost?
We bought the Bonvin rag picker from a gallery in London in 1969.
I think it's early 70s, but maybe.
I thought somebody won. But
Yeah.
And I hate to tell you this, it was $300.
Anyone? Yes, sir.
Does this kind of collection, do you ever have to worry about going on?
With this kind of
Yeah, I
question,
got it.
yeah,
No,
I just want to make sure everybody in the audience could hear it. But the question was, with this kind of collection, do you ever have to worry about provenance?
no,
No.
that's the definitive answer.
Yeah. That's the definitive answer. Okay, so any more? Okay, thank you all for coming. Thank you,
thank you.
Gabe and Yvonne.